Hello, hello.
Hello, welcome to
Episode 4, we
Yeah.
think?
EcoPods Live at 5.
Yeah.
So, this is where we start to get a little bit uncomfortable,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah. I guess at this point in the journey, we were coming across a lot of hurdles, and it felt like we were consistently putting out spot fires. Just as soon as one problem or one issue would get solved, 10 other things would pop up in its place.
Yeah, and they weren't easy. They were, at the time, they felt huge. And even looking back on it now, they're still quite large, weren't they? So, as we were progressing through getting the bank's approval to sell, to make the sale go through, on one hand, I was dealing with 3 creditors that were on title. Another one, one of those creditors was actually trying to force the sale as well, so going through court to get the block repossessed. So that was the bank and this other creditor were both trying to get this block repossessed, and Laura was working on the DA. By that time it was submitted, so it was sort of a waiting game, wasn't it?
Yeah, and with that, so obviously all the governing departments, and so we'd been told 90 days, 3 months, so that was early August. We should have gotten this approval back. And there were a lot of governing departments. So DFES in particular, they had like 1 or 2 staff members overseeing every single application that came through for WA. So they were like, I was calling, that guy was an absolute champion. I was calling him pretty much, it felt like constantly, and I felt so guilty about calling to just see where he was at, what was going on, could he push it through any further, like we were already so far behind, and he was a legend. But yeah, they were sort of, I think at that point he said to me, oh, we're 4 months behind schedule, and I was just like, oh my goodness. By the time DFES actually read our application, the fire management guidelines had changed, so the application that we submitted was out of date with the current guidelines. So the feedback that we got was, you haven't met this, you haven't met this, you haven't met this, and it's like, but that wasn't the guidelines when we submitted it. So that was incredibly frustrating. Again, our guys that did the bushfire management plan, they've been legends.
Yeah, they were fantastic.
Putting up with the guidelines have changed like 2 or 3 times whilst we've been going through this process. So that was one hurdle, was getting DFES to actually review, like to even open our file. And then we had the Department of Parks and Wildlife, who, whilst they were doing everything that they could, it was still like, it's just time. Like everyone's got so many piles of paperwork on their desk that they've got to work through. And for me, when I was having to call people and follow up, like they'd say to me, oh yeah, I'll have that to you by the end of the week, and then it'd be mid the following week, and I had such a huge internal battle to actually follow up with people, and I just wanted to kick the can down the road. I'd be like, no, they said that they were going to give me it back, they said they were going to do this, like let's just give people the benefit of the doubt.
The people pleaser coming out.
Yeah. And
I was on the other side being really, really triggered by people giving us a time frame and not sticking to it. And this happens all the time. But for me, trust and integrity is a big thing for me. So to have somebody else say, oh yeah, we'll get to it then, and then following them up then and nothing's happened, it was triggering the fuck out of me.
Yeah. Whereas for me, I was just like, I knew people were busy. I knew that they had all these other responsibilities. And I didn't want to be the pushy one. It was purely that people pleaser. Like, I would feel sick having to call people and follow up. And I'm pretty sure I had a few tantrums before phone calls of just like, why do I have to call them? You're the one that this is bothering. Like, why can't you call them? But we'd already said at the beginning, I'll deal with the government departments because
That's what you're good at.
Yeah, I have a bit of
Nice.
a better people manner.
And this was creating conflict between us because I was being triggered by one thing on one
and being
side.
triggered by me.
Yeah, and Laura was being triggered by me and trying to be nice.
Yeah, and it was really difficult. It was a really challenging time for me to navigate. And one of the tools that I actually did to make it easier and to make it easier for me to then follow up is when somebody would give me a time frame. If they didn't give me a time frame, I'd ask them for a time frame. So when can I expect that? When can I expect you to get back to me or to hear back from you? And most people are pretty airy-fairy. So I was trying to follow up and get like firm answers from people. And then I just say to them, okay, so if I call you back on this day, or if I call you back like on Wednesday afternoon or this time on this day, then I'll get an update then. So that made it easier for me to then follow up because I told them that I was going to do that and I'd gotten their agreement to do that. And sometimes they'd say, no, give me a little bit longer, or yep, that's fine.
And you were taking their names and their positions.
Yes,
and stuff.
so I was keeping detailed notes and getting their permission to actually call them back, which was huge. Like for me, that made it so much easier. I still then had the hurdle of when I would call them back, nothing would have happened, nothing would have changed.
And there was a couple of instances where you would get in contact with a couple of departments and they were on leave or they were on break.
That happened a lot.
So once again, I would be triggered by that because I was like, they would know if they were on leave when you asked them.
And they were probably like, yeah, sure, call me next week. Yeah, knowing full well that they weren't going to be there because they were like, haha. No, I'm sure it just slipped their mind. But it was still a challenge for me to push people and to keep them to what they'd said and to keep them to not just their own guidelines that they'd said that they were going to do, but also like government guidelines and government like time frame expectations and things. And it forced us to look in the mirror as well. It did.
This was like a massive personal development journey. Well, the start of, which is still going. It's still evolving.
Yeah. So people out there always say like whatever's going on in your external world is a mirror for you. And if you're being triggered by something, then there's something in you that isn't quite in alignment or isn't sitting right, and that's what's being projected back to you.
So yeah, we were facing our own reality, weren't we? Our own inner demons.
And we were painfully aware of that. That was hard.
It was. Very difficult. Yeah.
To actually, for both of us, to really get brutally honest with ourselves and with each other on where are we not showing up and where are we not keeping our commitments or over-promising and under-delivering. And that's actually, at that time, that was actually a really hard thing to admit. Like I personally found that quite difficult.
So did I, definitely.
Not just that putting myself on a pedestal, or like I can acknowledge when I've done something wrong, but in the like those little, I guess, consistencies actually, where am I being inconsistent and where am I not acting in alignment? That was a real challenge to initially to be able to see, and then once we'd seen it, actually be able to admit it
and do something about it, break through. Yeah.
So there was a lot of journaling in that time of working through that mirror and what was coming up.
Yeah. So we're fighting battles out in the external, and also facing them internally. So it was kind of a double-edged sword there, and it was challenging times.
And I guess a question that we would like to put to you guys is, what's triggering you right now, and where are you seeing like consistent feedback that's the same, either with the same interactions that you're having with different people or even the same person? Where is the pattern repeating and the story repeating, and where are you showing up like that, and what can you do about that, and how can you take responsibility for those things that might not be going as you expect?
Especially if you're chasing something that's very important, something that's like big for you in your life. What we noticed is all these little things show up in this project because it's very important to us. It's this is the major project in our life that's in alignment with what we want to create. And if all these little patterns are showing up here, then they're definitely showing up somewhere else in our life, but we're probably just not aware of it because it's not.
We hadn't been forced to look at it in the same way.
Yeah.
Because we started by questioning the project, and was this right? Was this right for us? Was it the right thing to be doing? Why were we doing this? Like, why were we putting ourselves through, at this point, torture?
Yeah.
Like, it was getting to a point of why, like, and we had people around us asking us that same question. And even now we still have people asking us, why are you still pursuing this?
Yeah.
But when we ask ourselves, is this the right thing for us to be doing? I know I personally get like a full body yes. Like, my whole body leans into it and is yes. And so then for me personally, it's like, okay, so what isn't in alignment then? And it's like, oh, there's something in me that I'm not doing, or what I'm saying and what I'm doing aren't in alignment. And so now I get to lean into that. We both get to lean into that and be congruent with what we do and what we say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not an overnight thing.
No. Consistent work. Yeah.
Yeah. And no judgment or pressure on yourself either when you're going through that work, because it can be difficult and it can be challenging, and but you can only be honest with other people if you can be honest with yourself.
That's true. So, yeah, the hurdles during this period were the creditors, government departments being slow. We got Parks and Wildlife out on site to determine what endangered species were here, and they thought there was nothing critically endangered, but then once we actually finally got the paperwork from them, they were asking for a flora and fauna survey, which was a month later than when we should already have approvals, because it had to be done in spring.
So there was a rare type of orchid that's like 2 kilometers away. There's one of these orchids, and we have a really similar leaf. So there's another one of the species that's really common, and we have thousands of them. And I say we, not on paper, the land isn't ours yet, but we still talk like it is. Maybe that makes us a little bit crazy, I don't know. So we had to do this survey in spring for this orchid. So we were getting stressed about that time frame. little did we know that that time frame actually didn't even matter in the slightest, because right about a week or two after we should have gotten the approval back from the council.
Well, once we'd done the spring survey, paid whatever it was to do a survey to determine there was none of these one rare orchid here, we got hit with a bombshell.
Yeah.
And Main Roads had written back to the council had gone back to Main Roads to clarify, and the secondary access that we were led to believe was our main entrance was actually illegal, and it was part of the conditions way back in the
90s.
day. Yeah.
Hadn't been recorded anywhere. So when we did our searches with WAPC, with the Shire, on title, it hadn't been recorded anywhere. It was on one letter that was written back in like early 90s.
So this was one major catalyst that has snowballed into a huge problem. And
it's something that even to this day we have ideas on what to do about it, but it's not overcome by any means. So
at that stage we just kept progressing.
We put our head in the sand on that actual issue for a long time. I think we didn't really accept that news. Like, we weren't ready to hear it.
No.
We'd invested financially and time-wise so much into that project, and I don't think our pride would let us acknowledge that we'd received that information.
Yeah, so we set out to solve it, didn't we?
Yeah.
And figured out where this happened, and that led to another huge story.
Another huge bomb.
That is basically taking us down a rabbit hole of issues of self-development, personal development.
A lot of self-doubt.
Wondering, is this the project for us? Should we be doing this?
Lots of tears.
Yeah.
Lots of tantrums.
Lots of
shouting. Yeah, with each other.
Yep.
And basically with anybody that we could direct our frustration at. Like, for a long time, we were not nice people to interact with, to be honest. Like, we were just blaming. And to some extent, I think we had to go through that, but I'm really glad that we're past that now, and that we can see that there's a much bigger picture. But I think we'll dive into that a bit more. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so in the next video, we'll take you down the rabbit hole of problems and issues and challenges that we faced.
And then more of what actually came up for us during that time, and how we dealt with it, or rather didn't deal with it at the time. And some of the things that we use, some of our tools that we use to actually get us through those difficult times.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And what day is it today? It's Wednesday today, so we'll see you on Sunday. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.